fire, water, earth, life, air, tech, magic,
playing raps,
undead. These are the 8 original elements in the Skylanders universe, and these 8 elements are perfectly encapsulated within the Giants. In the video game's lore, they are the first 8 Skylanders, being sent by Eon to stop the Arkeyan's rule of slavery. The Giants are a really iconic part of Skylanders games, so I thought to myself, how about for a February video I commemorate the Skylanders Giants and do a ranking video. So, how is this particular ranking going to be made? I booted up Skylanders Trap Team because that's my favorite Skylanders game, and I played a couple levels with the Giants. I then created a table with 3 categories in Google Sheets: abilities, design, and enjoyability. Abilities detail how unique a Skylanders moveset is, and whether it's powerful enough to dispatch a couple of enemies. Design, how Skylanders look in an aesthetic purpose. As tempting as it is, hats and trinkets do not count onto this list. Finally, enjoyability, how much I like the Skylander as a whole. Do keep in mind that this is my own personal opinion on all the Giants. This list is entirely based on how I perceive the 8 Giants as Skylanders. If you don't like some of the placements, then that's absolutely fine. This video's purpose is to entertain, and not so much a factual detail about how each of the Skylanders are good or not, so do take my opinions with a pinch of salt. Anyway, before we get into a ranking, I would like to mention 2 honorable mentions. First off, we have Granite Crusher, which is a special variant that I much prefer over the original design of Crusher. The black and blue really contrast well with each other, and it's one of my personal favourite variant Skylanders. However, I wanted to be fair to all the Giants, so I picked the original Crusher simply because he had more upgrades in his figure. Secondly, I also wanted to mention the Skylanders Alpha Build's Test Giant, best known as Chop Chop Daddy in the files. He is invincible and he can throw boulders to an insane degree, but that's about it. I don't have any emulation software, so I never played Chop Chop Daddy, and we all know that his design was later used for the Skylanders Trapmaster Crypt King, but I thought it was notable enough as a test Skylander to be at least included as an honorable mention. And now, without further ado, let us begin the ranking. I just want to quickly point out that this Skylander is not terrible. Having him with upgrades make him an absolute powerhouse, ready for any Skylanders collection. But unfortunately, someone had to be the bottom, and that Skylander is Crusher. Now, I want to start with the positives. His abilities aren't too bad. Conceptually, Crusher's abilities to freeze enemies in stone was completely new at the time. And if you pick the top path like me, if you hold down the primary attack button, then Crusher can spawn 3 sword blades from the ground, which I must say is pretty cool, and does thousands of damage. The amount of destruction he can cause onto an enemy is insane. Plus, the way he looks in the portal is just absolutely stunning, one with the blue eyes and the green crystals protruding from his shoulder. It would have been better if all the other crystals in his body lit up too, but hey, that's just wishful thinking, and what we got is also pretty good too. And while recording for this video, I finally bought Crusher's Soul Gem upgrade. I really enjoy Crusher's third ability now, and it makes him a lot more enjoyable when it comes to speed running, I mean crowd control. Sadly, Crusher's at the bottom for a reason. Compared to the rest of the Giants, I just find him pretty boring. How could you describe Crusher? Well, he's a generic rock golem with a hammer. I can already think of one Skylander who has this design and does it better. Rubble Rouser. He basically has the same idea when it comes to design like Crusher, being a generic rock golem with a hammer. However, Rubble Rouser is a significantly faster paced character, and his secondary attack allows him to dig through the ground and then knock back enemies, which is just a lot more satisfying in my opinion. Crusher, you can best describe him as a mighty glacier, someone who's very slow, but is very powerful. Another thing to mention is that his primary and secondary attack are completely useless unless you have an enemy right in front of you. Oh yeah, and to add extra salt into that wound, his secondary attack doesn't even work on bosses. So that's fun. Because of all these problems, it is very difficult to evade enemy attacks with him. So at the end of the day, Crusher isn't a terrible Skylander, just really disappointing. Everybody loves Eyeball, but I don't. I know if it's just me, or whether it's that horrible hot chocolate Gales always makes, but I've just never really been too huge on Eyeball. One thing that I always liked about Eyeball is his absolutely awesome design. I mean, it's a giant eyeball on top of a headless giant. How cooler could you get? And messing around with his secondary attack is just loads of fun. And plus, I just love how his eye illuminates when you put him on a portal. It's a very simple yet effective choice. The whole eyeball aesthetic was later used in superchargers with Dive Clops, and if I gotta be honest, I much prefer Dive Clops over his arguably more famous twin brother. I just really love mixing and matching his different combos using his torpedo gun and his sonar lock move. Meanwhile, Eyeball's tertiary attack is very naff. The miniature eyeballs are adorable, but they only do about 48 damage before spreading on to the next enemy. And as you can see here, it's just much better clearing them out by just punching them. And despite his godly secondary attack, Eyeball is another Skylander that does best when it comes to close range. And unless I use my secondary attack from a safe distance, then I find it rather difficult to evade enemy attacks with Eyeball. So yeah, this may be the most controversial opinion on this list, but I find Eyeball just pretty average. Ultimately, it was his creative design and his amazing secondary attack that lands him a spot above Crusher. Oh yeah, and one more little side rant. His tertiary attack in the Skylanders Giant Alpha builds are so much cooler than the ones we actually gotten. While I don't know whether they do the same amount of damage as the ones we eventually got, the designs just look a lot more fitting with the undead aesthetic than just eyeballs bouncing around and swarming at enemies.
Hello, I'm Steak.
Out of all the giants, I feel I've been a bit too unfair to Funback the most. Either all the other giants were maxed out on their upgrades, or I just had to buy their soldier move. So with the money that I have for Funback at the time, when I replayed the giants for this video, I made sure to buy every upgrade possible. Fortunately, I have to say from here on out, all the giants are pretty good. The only reason why Funback is in the lower half of the list is simply because I haven't played with him as much. Out of all the Skylanders appearing on this list, Funback has the most amount of long range, which is especially helpful for a slow Skylander like a Skylander Giant, which makes it much easier to do this. It's also really helpful that his primary attack does a lot of damage, which definitely helps with dealing with more than one enemy. However, while replaying as Funback, I found myself not using his other two attacks. His secondary attack is probably my least favorite out of all of them. I just find it very jarring and awkward, and it doesn't really do much damage. His tertiary attack is really good if you aren't swarmed by a couple of enemies. That's because when you're trying to use your tertiary attack on an enemy and you get hit by them, the animation's disrupted. So at the end of the day, this makes Funback a bit of a one-trick pony for me. It just makes me feel that I shouldn't bother using the tertiary and secondary attack because it just makes me end up taking more damage when my primary attack could clear many enemies at once and does great amount of damage with what it can do. In terms of design, well, it speaks for itself. He's a giant whale. I would have liked something a bit more creative, like eyeballs, but hey, what we got for the water element isn't too bad. Sadly, this design isn't further enhanced because of his light core effects when you put on the portal. And it's a shame too, because I generally think that the concept of having his barnacle arms being the part that lights up is a really good idea. However, the light effects are very dim, and the fact that it's shining blue and not purple like the actual barnacles look like is something which I'm just not very pleased with. I don't mind Funback, he's a very fun Skylander for what he is, but it's because I find myself mainly using his primary attack. Funback is a Skylander that I wouldn't necessarily would play all the time, and the other 5 giants are just much more closer to my heart. Gold star for effort though. And now on to a giant that pretty much every Skytuber owns. I mean, who doesn't love T-Rex? He's such an iconic Skylander, and is easily the most recognizable giant in this countdown. I myself really like T-Rex too. When fully upgraded, the amount of damage he can do with his primary attack is just insane, and his secondary attack is so satisfying to perform when you're near smaller enemies. His tertiary attack is decent too, but it doesn't really give me that same sense of power that I have compared to the other two attacks. And sometimes it's a bit difficult to aim with it too, but I still like having the option of having a long-ranged attack. In terms of design, he's just a living tree, which is something we've already seen with Stump Smash. But the addition of his bark horns and the red accents in his design really makes him stand out a lot more than Stump Smash in my opinion. Furthermore, his light core effects are really astonishing. The green from his cannon armor is very vivid, but I especially love his blue eyes. The extra detailing in his pupils make it look like if he's finally woken up from his slumber, ready to go back and save Skylands once he's put in the portal. I really like T-Rex, and I'm glad that Activision picked him as the starter pack giant, securing him a comfortable and decent spot in 5th place.
Where's Big World?
Now we've descended into the top half of the list, and what better way to kick it off than with Bouncer. Bouncer's primary attack is very addictive. It deals 28 damage per bullet, and while it doesn't give me that much sense of destruction compared to the likes of Drobot and Trigger Happy, I still find it a very stimulating way to clear out hordes of enemies. But unlike Thumbback, I see myself using more than one of his attacks. For instance, his lasers are very awesome in a visual standpoint, while also dealing just the right amount of damage for it to be a very satisfying move. He also has a very great long-range move, which is something that our previous entrants lacked. If you hold with your secondary attack button and then aim with a joystick, you can control where the missile lands. It's a bit of a difficult move to get right at first, but perfected over time, and it will clear lots of enemies. I only have the legendary variant for Bouncer, but that doesn't detract from his very unique design. He is a giant robot supported by a wheel, which really reminds me of the robot's character Big World. In fact, it reminded me of him so much that I even nicknamed him Big World. See a need for the lead, I suppose. It's another iconic Giants design, and I'm super glad that I'm replaying all the Giants in Trap Team, because Bouncer looks very gorgeous in game. Now, I've been a bit of a silly Billy, and I forgot to take a photo of Bouncer when he's on the portal, so here's just an image which I found on the internet. His body and eyes glow up, which creates such a cool effect, which makes me imagine that Bouncer's powering up again when you place him on the portal. Bouncer fits perfectly with the rest of the tech Skylanders, and I'm glad they went with this design instead of this boring and quite ugly design that they used for his prototype. What happens when you cross a ninja and a genie? Well, you get Ninjini. It's a unique idea for a Skylander, which is executed very well. Ninjini mainly specializes in close range, so obviously a primary attack will be just her swinging her swords. It's a basic but useful way to clear enemies that may be standing right in front of you. Her secondary attack allows her to go back into a bottle and shoot some missiles out at enemies. I find this attack very enjoyable to play, as I know that my enemies are getting defeated by just a little bottle. Furthermore, she's got a great tertiary attack to boot. She can summon 3 orbs and scatter them across the battlefield. I only really use this attack if there's swarms of enemies around me, or if there are enemies on an unreachable spot, but the damage output is just right. It's a very unique moveset for a unique Skylander like Ninjini. The magic element is generally the most varied when it comes to Skylander's designs. Ninjini is no different. She looks like a genie in samurai armor. It's not my favorite design, but it does suit her character very well. I love all the Skylanders giants that suit better when it comes to close range. Ninjini has to be my favorite. She is moderately fast, for a giant at least, and her swift, majestic, yet brutal attacks make her a lot more enjoyable compared to Crusher and Eyebrow in my personal opinion. The real reason why she's in my top 3 is mainly because of bias, which affects a lot of these upcoming Skylanders, including this one. I remember when my sister would join a game of Skylanders with me, she would always pick Ninjini. While Skylanders were still selling in local retail stores, we often mainly bought our Skylanders second hand, but my sister bought Ninjini brand new, so as a result, she's probably one of the only Skylanders she has ever upgraded, which also explains the ridiculously ludicrous amount of money my Ninjini has. That bias alone of having a sibling enjoy a Skylander really much is really what elevated Ninjini to the 3rd position for me. And playing as Ninjini, I understand why my sister was obsessed with her. Hello, This is post-editing Biono Hero here. I've been a silly bitty once again, and I forgot to talk about the light core features of Ninjini, so I'll make this quick. It's easily my favorite one out of all the giants. The glowing mist effects and the glowing eyes breathes life into the character, and it's just generally really eye-catching. I love it so much. Okie dokie, now the video can continue. Bye!
You like jazz?
The air element is an element that I'm not always too fond of, but I'm glad they have such a unique giant like Swarm. Out of all the other giants, Swarm is easily the most varied and well-rounded, a jack of all trades if you will. His primary attack works well when you're in close range or medium range of an enemy. They're awesome out of the box, but when fully upgraded they can deal to about 116 damage. And the buzzing synth-like effects that accompany the attack really is the icing on the cake. His secondary attack is brilliant. He can fly around, which helps for maneuverability for a start, but he can also shoot his pincers from far away. His third attack is also quite interesting, and it's more personality driven. He can converge into a swarm of bees and walk into enemies. It's a very interesting concept that hasn't never been seen in any other Skylander. He's useful for chip damage, but I much prefer using his other two attacks, which deals much more damage in a much quicker time. He's really overpowered when you fully upgrade him, but easily my favorite upgrade would have to be when you hold down his primary attack and it deals over 200 damage. His design is also very unique for the air element. He doesn't follow the same light blue color scheme like all the other air Skylanders, and rather it prioritizes a beautiful honey orange color scheme, which is very fitting for a Skylander who's supposed to represent bees. The designers could have just created a generic and boring giant cloud, so I'm really glad that they went with this design. The air element couldn't have had a better giant. If I ever make a top 30 Skylanders video, then Swarm will definitely be on that list. I remember getting him the same time I got Skylanders Swap Force, and he was one of the first Skylanders I played in that game. And I remember being pleasantly shocked with the fact that his flying ability could actually allow him to shoot his pincers. If I were to sum up Swarm in one sentence, it will be variety in a big package. He's easily the fastest and most agile out of all the giants. All his attacks are very useful in many different situations, and at the end of the day, the only thing that I'm not too keen on about Swarm is the way he lights up when he's placed on the portal. His eyes shine bright white, which is pretty standard for a light core figure, but only one of his pincers glow and not the other. This is something that really bothers me, and it's such a missed opportunity, as the glow effect is really good, so I just really wish that Activision also made the other pincer light up, and then you could have had a very perfect light core effect all round. But if a nitpick of how the Skylander lights up in the portal, then you got yourself a real gold mine of a Skylander. And to top it all off, he's even a Cristiano Ronaldo fan.
If this isn't cleaned up when I get back, you're fired!
If you stuck with my channel for quite some time now, I don't think this choice should come as much of a surprise. This fella's not only my favorite giant, but also my favorite fire Skylander, Hothead. I love everything about him, and I'm not trying to be biased, but I'm very biased. His primary attack can cover a wide area of field, defeating many enemies. His secondary attack is what really makes him stand out though. He can cover enemies in oil, and then set them alight using his primary attack. But it's not useless on its own too. It can deal knockback damage to enemies. But the creme de la creme of Hothead's arsenal will definitely have to be his tertiary attack. He can summon a rain of fire, which deals lots of chip damage. And when upgraded, you can also use his primary attack while using his tertiary attack to make a ring of oil, which damages nearby enemies. And I just love the destruction it brings as well, seeing all the enemies being destroyed by that one move. He can also turn into a motorcycle, which is his soul gem move, which I think is great for increasing Hothead speed and maneuverability. His design looks like a beefed up Eruptor, just another fire golem. But even then, I still find it a very iconic design. I love how there are exhaust pipes protruding from his shoulders. It's very genius. The only thing I don't really like about his design, and if I gotta be honest, the only thing I don't really like about Hothead is his light core effects. When I was younger, I thought the reason why the fire in his hands wouldn't light up was because I chewed on them too much. But no, it's actually supposed to be his head that lights up, and that really kinda sucks. But that flaw is merely just a barely visible dent on this really awesome Skylander. Because at the end of the day, Hothead was the first Skylander I ever owned. During that time, I never had a console, so the reason why I bought Hothead in that one fateful trip to TK Maxx was because I just generally thought he looked cool. Hotheads didn't just introduce me to Skylanders, He also introduced me to video gaming as a whole. That nostalgia, and nostalgia alone, is the reason why Hothead's at number 1. If I got the Giants much later, then Swarm could have been my favorite, but for being my very first Skylander, Hothead just always had that special place in my heart for me. When I think of Skylanders Giants, I think of Hothead. That's just how much I love him, and that unconditional bias I have for him is the reason why he places number 1 on my Giants ranking video. One factor that I really loved making about this video is re-exploring all the Skylanders Giants. My Skylanders collection did start with a Giant, so I generally have a lot of respect for them. Being the first gimmick landers of the series, the Giants smashed it out of the park. Even the 2 Skylanders, which I just considered average at best, had something to bring to the table, which made me learn to appreciate them a lot more. You probably have heard the famous tale of the tortoise and the hare, and its core message of slow and steady wins the race. That's the best way I can describe the Giants. Following Swarm, all of the Giants are incredibly slow, but once you upgrade them and master the secrets, they become the most enjoyably overpowered Skylanders in the whole franchise. But hey, that's my opinion. What's yours? What is your favourite Skylanders Giant, and why? I'm open to any opinions. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next video.